1, 2, 3.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all for being with us here today. I know it's one of the last panels of the afternoon, so even more appreciated that you're all here to talk about this amazing topic that we have. We have some panelists here that come from as far as Zurich and as wide as Paris, so it's really great to have these speakers here that are going to talk to you about a topic that I think is the only one really related to this technology here at this conference. Although we might be biased, we believe that it's a technology that is currently revolutionizing the world and will have a lot of impact on the world. And we wanted to make the connection towards, let's say, what Building Bridges stands for, which is really the intersection of finance and impact. And so I was speaking to someone the other day, I think it was on Tuesday during the conference, and I was mentioning, yeah, you know, I work for a blockchain firm. And her reaction was like, blockchain impact? Is that really possible? So hopefully we can do a bit of myth busting here today, and that you feel like, okay, blockchain can have a positive impact on the world, and especially, I think, in this case, related to the banking sector. So without further ado, I think let's let our panelists maybe introduce themselves. You all work for very reputable organizations, banks, and the likes. And so maybe as well you can give us your first foray into blockchain as well, so that people, it's not just through what you consider apes and these NFTs, this metaverse, all these kind of wild things, but maybe there's some other more formal, professional ways to get into this industry too. So maybe, yeah, a little bit about yourselves, your backgrounds, your company, and then we can start. Felix first.
So I'm Felix from Incor Bank. We're a bank in Zurich and a transaction bank, so a bank for other banks and infrastructure provider, basically for institutions. We're in the digital asset space since 6 years, so quite some time, and do really from A to Z quite a lot of things, very similar to as they are happening in the traditional finance world. Building bridges, back in those days, there were a lot of bridges to still be built. We were able to reach some of those, but there's always something in the evolution. You know, there's always something new to do. Fortunately enough, this niche industry is evolving quickly and in the right direction. And maybe to me personally, I'm in banking since 15 years, 16 years, and half of that is in blockchain world. Here in Switzerland, we came up with new versions of how to do crypto exchanges, how to tokenize, security tokenization. Then we have, I have influenced also some of the working groups with the regulatory, so that's also a very important part to that we have a DLT Act in place. We do have law here in Switzerland. And well, over the years, over 7 years, you see really quite an evolution of in the beginning, a weirdo niche play for crypto enthusiasts and I don't know, students and stuff like that, all the way to today, where we already have big institutions. We can read of the huge BlackRock activities and stuff like that online, but quite some stuff is happening here in Switzerland, and that's really what hopefully we can explore a little bit, and yeah.
Fantastic.
Give us hope for the future.
Yeah, thank you so much. And maybe just to interject there before we continue with some of the intros, I think Felix used some buzzwords, you know, DLT and the likes. Maybe we can just get a quick raise of hands as well. I mean, who of you know what blockchain technology is? Maybe get a raise of hand if people know what blockchain technology is. Yeah, okay, so I guess like half of the room. So I think we will, before deep diving into it, give an explanation of blockchain itself. Maybe as sometimes it's often seen that, you know, blockchain and crypto are synonymous. Maybe one other question: does anyone own any form of digital asset, cryptocurrency in the room? Maybe just with a raise of hand if you own any crypto. everyone's so shy. It's like just like nobody wants to really raise their hand. Okay, I think that was kind of like a third or maybe half. Thank you. Great. So at least now we know a little bit of tempo, and happy to also engage as much as possible all of you here, because one of the desires that we had when coming on stage today was that we're able to support in demystifying a little bit this industry as well. So if you do have any questions to our audience, we are here for a decent amount of time. I think there's just under 90 minutes. So if you have any questions, please feel free to interject, and we can have a rather interactive conversation. So fantastic. At least that set a little bit of points. Maybe Milko, you'd love to go next.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Milko Hensel. I work for Merke Baumann, which is a Swiss private bank. We have combined all our client service offering that is related to digital assets, crypto, blockchain technology, all the buzzwords we already mentioned, under the brand Archip, which also reflects part of it, what Felix already said. We try to bridge traditional and innovative digital finance. And in order to do this, the A symbolizes the arch that connects the traditional world and the digital world. I myself, I'm with Merke Baumann almost 11 years now. In banking more than 25 years, incredibly enough, yeah. And for me, digital assets and blockchain technology is something that is really an innovative thing that everybody was waiting for, actually, to wake up the finance scene, the financial industry, in order to go new directions, to accept that technology is something that is essential to banks, and that you have to follow the requirements of the users of finance, instead of putting every year more and more financial products in front of the clients that they may not need, definitely don't understand, and that they don't own, and the only reason for having all these products is to increase the revenue for the bank and not the wealth of the individual. And with blockchain technology, I think the basic idea is to put power and responsibility and ownership back into the hands of those that actually own the assets. And in doing so, the banks have to define then a new role. And perhaps we can talk about this in more detail later. But definitely what we've seen as a bank, that in order to service clients properly, we have to have a different approach to what our role is in this business, and what our understanding is of financial services.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, and thank you for giving a little bit of extra context there related to blockchain. Aliyah, would you like to go next?
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me here today, Shiraz. And it's a really important topic that we're here to discuss today, so I'm really glad to be a part of the conversation. I represent Signum Bank. We're based in Zurich and now also in Singapore, Abu Dhabi, Luxembourg, and Liechtenstein, but we're the world's first digital asset bank. So our co-founders actually came together with the idea of seeing that all of this activity was happening in the crypto world, but there wasn't a way for anybody in crypto to access traditional finance. Today in 2024, it's quite different. I think many banks are opening their doors and willing to engage with the crypto world, but back in 2016-17, this was absolutely not the case. And so in Switzerland, we're quite lucky to have a regulator like FINMA, who is willing to engage with us and really kind of go on that educational journey to understand how we could use existing regulation to also regulate crypto assets. And so we received our banking license in 2019. And today, of course, it's much more, let's say, a lot more inertia with that trend. And we see a lot of banks around the world following suit, as well as now in Europe next year, we will see with MiCA and these new regulation and regulatory clarity coming into place, that there will be more and greater adoption of blockchain. But I think it's also important to maybe separate the two, right? Because on one side you have access to crypto and crypto assets, which is, I think, a lot of what banks are doing today, allowing their customers to buy Bitcoin and so on, but also using blockchain to simplify financial processes. And Sygnum Bank is actually doing a lot of things on that front as well, which hopefully we'll talk about more in the panel. And about myself, I am originally from India, been in Switzerland for 8 years. I worked in blockchain before I moved into the finance world, so I'm a little bit straddling both worlds, but I work in the bank on product innovation topics as well, so really looking to see where we can use the stability and the reputation of a Swiss bank into really solving problems for the crypto and Web3 industry, because it's still such a nascent industry, and there's a lot of areas where we can support its growth and development. So happy to be here. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Julie. I think it's really important to know, for the audience, maybe you've heard other bankers speak over the past couple of days. I think one thing that resonates quite well with me is that a lot of your banks were established with this kind of forward-thinking mindset from its roots, from its core, and hearing about so much of the innovation first sounds definitely like something we're going to get closer into in a bit. But then, yeah, without further ado, Chris, who is actually the only non-banker on the panel.
How lucky here. Or how scary.
What are you doing here?
They're trying to chase me off already. So my question for all of you before, so who's coming at this from the kind of finance point of view? Who's here from, in like you're in a finance field? Okay, and hands down. Who's in the development field? What are the rest of you doing? Okay, so, okay, I'm happy to just wave. Hi. So I'm Chris. I co-founded and lead an initiative called Giga. It's an infrastructure investment initiative. So we build infrastructure for school connectivity and hospital connectivity, specifically internet infrastructure. We help governments connect their schools and hospitals to the internet. It's super important because 2 billion people in the world don't have access to the internet, which means not only are they not part of the crazy crypto world, which one may or may not think is a good thing, but they also don't have access to jobs, opportunity, the future, the things that so many of us take for granted every day. And we do this infrastructure investment by helping governments understand data about where internet is and isn't. And in order to do that, we use a lot of this magic technology called blockchain, which is actually not that magical. It's pretty simple. And so I'm excited to be here because we work with a lot of banks, we work with a lot of central banks, we advise them on their regulatory practices for how to get this technology, which I believe we shouldn't have a panel on blockchain in 5 years. It should, like, nobody has a panel on TCP/IP or DNS, even though those are how you use the internet. Nobody has a panel on that. I mean, nerds do, but unserious people like us don't. So at some point, this should just be a type of technology that is there because it helps us have a better sense of truth of what's actually happening around the world. And so I'm happy to talk about that today. We do, when we work with banks, we do engage in large financing for government projects at the $100 million and $500 million plus level. We obviously need banks to be involved in that. And the way that we create trust and show them that things are investable is by having data that you can prove provenance of, and having this database, which we'll talk about more in the call, having this database that exists everywhere at once, everywhere all the time, all at once, is a really good way of building investor confidence. My background before this, I set up the first public sector crypto fund, so we did investments in using ETH and Bitcoin in 2017 and 18, and before that I built tech companies, mostly in emerging markets.
Fantastic. Chris, well, it's great to have you on the panel with us. I think you're an expert at making what seems to be impossible possible. So if any of you have any very tricky questions, Chris is definitely the one to be able to answer them. Then yes, Paul, last but not least.
Hello everyone, so in a few sentences you will quickly guess who's coming from Paris. I'm working at Banque de Lubac, and it was actually one of the first French banks to be in line with the regulatory requirement, and quite quickly about crypto assets, right? And what was really interesting is that at least a lot of our partners, fintechs, startups, etc., were quickly rejected, at least in France, from their traditional banks. And we ended up with almost all of them, and they came to us with really basic issues, right? How to get access to an account, how can I do payments, etc. And quite quickly, the expertise of the bank grew quite a lot. And we ended up having a lot of discussion with those new players, how they wanted to solve issues in the world by using this magic technology, as was mentioned. And their solutions were actually quite understandable from everyone's point of view. They were actually trying to transform what we are used to by using this kind of technology. And it's actually, on a personal point of view, quite interesting to be there today, because I actually spent around 10 years in traditional finance, corporate and investment banking, then actually built some startup, and one of them was like almost 10 years ago, was about blockchain. And at this point of time, I think blockchain, the thing that everyone said, that it was a solution searching for a problem to solve. And fast forward right now, there's some hype, obviously, because Bitcoin breached $100K, etc. But we can actually see banks and institutional firms looking at this technology and not only looking at, okay, I don't want to expose my clients to such strange assets, but actually looking at the technology beyond that and how it could help in solving issues, optimizing processes, etc. And that's actually what we are doing at Banque de Lubac, helping those players improve those areas. And I think we'll talk about that a bit more in the panel after that.
Definitely. Thank you so much. So maybe just to kind of put a little bit of perspective furthermore here, I mean, let's say in contrast to Alia with Signum that was founded as a crypto bank, both yourself, Felix, Milko, Paul, your organizations, well, your banks, sorry, are traditional, let's say, by design, right? Maybe let's just talk for a moment about like those maybe complexities about internally being able to have certain forms of like education or stakeholder management about actually getting involved in this industry, which has been seen by many in the traditional world as quite a leap forward, or quite a scary leap forward, let's say. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that, and maybe Felix with yourself first.
Yes, sure. So, well, back in 2018 was when we were starting to develop the whole idea. That was when we saw the client demand was there. There was the media was there. There were, we just saw that there is something happening. That was after the crazy 2017 year. Then that year we still had, the ICOs going on and all that. Before then it got a little bit on a bumpy road. Let's put it like that way. But we saw that something has already been changed. Something has changed very, very strongly since what was before 2017, and then in 2017 there some volume and value. You can argue about that, but a lot of stuff was already created. Now, it was still super early, and it was back then we needed to reinvent everything. Together with our client banks and internally, from regulation over how it fits into our processes, how we chat with it together with FINMA, because that was a new topic, all of that. Now, it was not so complicated to get in there, because maybe we are, you need to have somebody needs to start it anyway. You need to have a brave client, a brave infrastructure, a brave regulator, FINMA here in Switzerland, brave politicians, Uli Maurer and so on, visiting Crypto Valley and so on. It's really, these were defining moments. Now we saw that already, and then it made it, the first step was already done. We started to develop the whole thing, and it was difficult. Now, a little bit going forward, today, it's fortunately enough, it's the absolute opposite. Today, we have got large, not private banks, not commercial banks, but retail banks this year very strongly coming in here in Switzerland, and internationally, they are slowly following. Well, with Mika, fortunately, we have now it's already decided almost 2 years ago, and now being activated. So we have some regulatory clarity in Europe. The others will hopefully join as well. It takes a bit of time. But now it's already not the first movers. That is over. At the same time, since then, the market price, the amount of tokens in the good and in the bad side, have increased tremendously. But fortunately we earned some experience over the years. So fortunately it changed quite a lot.
Yeah, sounds like it. And Milko, maybe yourself next on the same question. I see that even in the logo that we see on the slide here, right, that it's R-chip, not Murky Bauman, so that means, of course, you've had quite an evolution as well. Would you like to speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we were in a lucky position that our owners, our EXP, were very much in favor of innovation and new developments. And the same was true for most of the staff in our bank. And basically, if you know something about private banking, it is boring, it should be boring, and it's not very, very innovative. But for those that want to do something new, something different, then this idea of blockchain technology was the right idea at the right time to move ahead and say, okay, look, this is something that is of interest to our clients, and hence we should have a look at it. What we did is we were in the lucky situation that Signum was not yet there. We had a lovely partner that already worked for us in the traditional world, and we convinced them, friendly, to go in the same direction as we did, to think of how can we set up blockchain technology, how can we initiate wallets, how can we do the technology part. This was mainly on the in-course side, whereas we had to talk about challenges like how do I validate if assets that are moved on the blockchain are legit or not? Where do I find the sources? Who can provide me information on that? How do I check this? And basically, what we did is on the one side we went to FINMA, we would talk to lawyers, we talked to other experts at that field in that time, and said, look, in the traditional way, I would do this. Why don't I do this the same way on the blockchain technology with an add-on that I exactly know where these coins come from because of the blockchain immutability, and you can trace every movement backwards. So you can go back to the mining company to find who did mine this Bitcoin initially. And so this gave us confidence to go ahead and say, okay, yeah, we are open for business, for companies, for private individuals that have digital assets as part of their business. And basically we had the same luck or chance that you had in France. There was not much competition at that time. Soon after that, we had Signum and Amina joining the club, but this is good also because that initiates competition and it keeps us agile. And so, yes, we also have clients that just need a bank account and nothing more, and they're happy with that. And the other side, we have other clients that want very, very much more from us. And that's a challenge that we still face, that we have to be as fast as our clients develop. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And you've spoken a lot about FINMA, both of you. Maybe here, Paul, you can share your, let's say, the French side experience, maybe with the AMF, maybe not, maybe Mika. How has it been for you within de Lubac?
And I think, I mean, not as well as Switzerland, but France was still on the market from a regulatory point of view quite early. We had the Loi Pacte, which actually defined a really interesting, I would say, area of where we could innovate. And we actually had a lot of startups, fintechs, launching in this. But what I also wanted to address, because we've all spoken about the fact that we've been in blockchain for some years, and we also suffered a lot from what I call the proof of concept syndrome. You have seen a lot of banks, big institutions that are doing marketing things around blockchain, saying, oh, I tokenized a bond on blockchain. And then it was just a blockchain between two persons exchanging one token. And then we heard a lot about, okay, I use the technology, I tick the box, right? Whereas now we are talking about the use case. And as Chris mentioned, we are not talking about blockchain, we are talking about what we are trying to solve initially, and I think it's a really good place to be in the blockchain right now, because we're actually bringing new types of products, helping solve new solutions, etc. And we've actually got all those French players talking to us for the past 5 years, because we were their only bank, right? And it actually allowed us to not talk about the technology, but actually put forward use cases where the technology would help the day-to-day life of people, or even optimizing processes that were inefficient. And actually, when we talk about the technology, you will hear several types of infrastructure. Everyone knows about blockchain on Bitcoin. You know, let me just exchange this piece of money. It's not a money technically, by the way. Let me just exchange this piece of value between two persons, and actually everyone will know about it. But actually, when we talk about what blockchain was launched for initially, at least for ETH, etc., and the other blockchain, it was about removing the middleman, you know, bringing trust and removing the middleman. It was all about efficiency, and it actually took a lot of time for big corporates to have trust in those things. Yeah. We always hear about the bad things in blockchain, right? The crashes, the scams, etc., the NFTs, the Bored Apes, and those kind of things. What we don't hear that much about, and that's why I'm quite happy that we get the chance to talk about this in such a big conference, is what is actually bringing value to the banking ecosystem through this kind of technology. Yeah. You will see at the Lubac, we brought a lot of things, but I think we'll address that just after.
In a bit. Yeah, fantastic. No, thank you so much for sharing those thoughts. And maybe to kind of, let's say, turn the coin a little bit and speak with yourselves, Ali and Chris, where your organizations, or let's say Signum, was founded. I remember, you know, the day it was announced as a crypto bank, the first crypto bank. And Chris, you know, hearing that UNICEF and the ITU are coming together to found Giga, and that you were connecting all these schools together with blockchain technology. I was like, wow, are we really going to see that mass adoption? So I'd love to see kind of, or hear from both of you at that inception of both of your organizations, from the perception and perspective that we just got here from our fellow panelists. Was it, as you were founded with blockchain kind of from the get-go, was it easier for you, or did you still encounter some challenges or not? Maybe, Elia, if you'd like to start first.
I think when you're working with a new technology, and kind of really, it's completely blue ocean when you're going out there, it's fraught with challenges. There's no part of this that has been easy. So that's, I think, the bottom line. I mean, especially with starting 7-8 years ago, there was no roadmap for us to follow. And when I think our co-founders were coming up with the idea and going out into the market, I think in those days it was not at all clear that we would, you know, be successful in any realm, or that even the question of whether blockchain as an asset class was around to stay. This was 100% not clear in 2017, and when I entered the industry back then, I remember my family asking me, like, are you sure? Like, this is just like a drug dealer's payment mechanism, and is this something you really want to put your career on? And it was a very, very different time. But I think also what's cool about starting out with an agenda of like building something that doesn't exist before is that you have the opportunity to kind of build it as you need, based on the requirements of the industry at the time. So there's pros and cons to this, right? So on one side, because we were a traditional bank, we also still had to connect to traditional banking infrastructure. And that means we had to still use kind of the core banking systems that everybody knows. And then the laughs on this panel is just like, without taking names, to say that core banking systems are usually quite terrible pieces of software. Like, they were built in the 1990s, I think, and they haven't particularly been updated since then. And so think about any technology from 1990s and then trying to add something as innovative or new as like blockchain to this. It's just, I mean, like I said, it's not easy. But on the blockchain side of things, so on one side, it was building like a kind of standard core banking software integration to accept a new asset class, right? So that was one piece of the puzzle. But the other piece was where at Signum, we were also very clear we wanted to build something new. We weren't just trying to connect existing core banking systems to blockchain, but we were actually also trying to create new tech stacks that could be more efficient. And this is what Paul attributed to just now as well, is that there's a lot of scope for efficiency gains in using the technology for the processes that are really, honestly, so inefficient within banks today. And so we devoted an entire arm of the bank to something called tokenization, we call it, or it's our future finance hub or product innovation, however you want to call it, right? But in this one section of the bank, we're really using this as a sandbox to experiment with all the promises of blockchain, but trying to integrate those into the finance world. And I think this bridge, like, trying to, I guess, make that unhappy compromise where we know in some ways we have to still use the existing systems because we want to be accepted in the existing financial realm, but also to be able to still push forward on the vision that we have for this future finance where we can do things a lot more efficiently and also bring that transparency, bring that ease of access to many, many more asset classes without adding to the administrative overhead of it. And kind of having both those goals play out together at the same time.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing that. I think it's interesting, you know, and just kind of echo as well what Paul was saying before, right? When, you know, you talk about blockchains, disintermediation, and you hear it coming from a bank, you know, on the other side of the spectrum, you have, well, what? You know, the whole blockchain crypto community is like, do we really need banks? And you have some pretty reputable banks here telling you about how blockchain is disintermediating other parts and not, let's say, necessarily their core function either. So I think it's an interesting comparison there.
And
Chris,
sorry, just to add to that as well is, on one side, yes, of course, it's integrating blockchain as a technology into our tech stacks and bringing efficiency, etc. But on the other, it is that almost no one I know truly wants to be responsible for all of their money. It's very hard work. It's a very stressful job. And if you've grown up your entire life as a society entrusting this to a third party like a bank, even today, like no matter how many times you write down your seed phrase and put it into a safe box and put that into a fireproof box and then put that at the bottom of the ocean to keep it really, really safe, it's still really stressful. You know, what if someone finds it? And that is why I think all of us that have created banks that support this asset class have done this based on client demand. Because people who've made their wealth in blockchain, even if they deeply believe in the principles of Bitcoin and all of this, some part of them is still anxious about losing access, and that's why, thankfully, we all, you know, still are able to help them and support them in this.
Yeah.
Now we all know your security protocol and where your seed phrase is. So, you know, I think we've been building new technology stuff for a long time, and I love doing it. I think building is very exciting, but as you said, Elliot, it's also very difficult. Like, there's nothing easy about building something new. Otherwise, somebody would have done it before. I guess I have another audience question, which is, who's working in your day-to-day? Who's working with blockchain tech already? No. Okay. Who won? Who got that one? Who wants to be working with blockchain tech? Anybody like have a yearning for it in your company corporate life? Yeah. You want crypto advice? Okay, so I'll get there in a second. But I want to talk about something. I want to first answer the question. I think it's a great point, and I'm sure we're getting there. So my question was, so there's some people who are curious about it. When we were starting to develop the question of how do you monitor and understand the world of digital inclusion, like how do you know if a school is connected? How do you know if a hospital is connected far away? We needed a technology that could tell us that in real time. So we didn't go out hunting for blockchain. Blockchain was the thing that allowed us to, it allowed you to have a database somewhere that was talking to you in real time. And so as our journey, when we were trying to move that forward, then you need a thing that database can move, and often that's some token that the database can send to another database, and you can kind of hear what's happening. For us to get UNICEF to recognize that token was an accepted piece of doing business was not easy. So we were building this inside of a big organization, which is part of the UN, which is another big, it's like a big egg inside of an even bigger egg. And for us to start moving value along this database was even harder. So in 2016 and 17, we worked with all of the lawyers in the UN, the finance experts, to get Bitcoin and Ethereum classified as assets. And that was really, really hard. That was on the crypto side, and we managed to do that. It took us about 3 years. But then we also had to explain some concepts to the organization, concepts like smart contracts. So if you haven't worked much with blockchains in your day-to-day life, smart contract is going to sound like it's a smart contract. That's whatever. Once you get into blockchain world, that becomes a very important concept, and it's actually not a contract. So your lawyers will come to you and be like, this isn't a contract, why are you calling it a smart contract? We lost about a year because the terminology was off. We were saying this thing from the tech world that actually didn't make sense to our lawyers, and they kept saying, why are you bringing this thing it's not a contract, you're calling it a contract. All of these are things that you need to struggle with if you're bringing something new into a legacy organization. And I think that the promise of intermediaries like banks or technology companies that will intermediate this tech are that they can do that translation more easily. And so we're not there yet. There aren't enough tech companies that can be those intermediaries, but the groups that you're used to working with to provide other IT services will also be providing a lot of this new database. And again, I think it'll be invisible. It'll be very boring. The fun will be out of it for me because I like the new thing. But that means that it will have reached scale. And when we're now we're in 40 countries now, working with central banks and ministries of ICT and education, they're all recognizing that this type of communication layer is something that's not esoteric, it's not scary, it's something that can be used in a simple way to make their job better. And I think that's been the work of the last 5 years, and I'm just exhausted. You know, like, I wish we hadn't had to take 5 years to say that this database is not such a scary thing. But in fact, truth is scary. And real-time data is scary, and real-time financial data is scary, and being able to build synthetic financial products off of other stuff and trade them in real time is scary. So we're working with a lot of fear as well, because it's a new technology.
Thank you, thank you. And I did want to take the time up until this point to speak to you. Of course, we did a little bit of intros, but about the challenges, because it's working with blockchain technology has never been easy. Over the past 7 years, there's been a lot of, let's say, sentimental change within and without the industry that we're in. And so I thought it was very important part to talk about the difficulties that each one of the individuals here on the panel have faced, so that if any of you within your organizations are looking at implementing this technology, you'll at least be able to get a little bit of their experience over, as Chris mentioned, the past 5 years that their organization has been doing so. But now, of course, I think as some of the panelists want to get into the core meat and bones of the topic, we're talking a little bit more on the green banking side. And I think if you look at it from a green banking side, you're looking at a new form of what you kind of consider a bank. Blockchain technology as a data management system is not necessarily plug and play, it's more rip and replace. And so what other forms of innovation are going to be needed for blockchain technology to be enhanced within a bank to be able to make it more green? So those are some of the topics we're going to be talking about now. We spoke a little bit about before, you know, this big word called tokenization. And I know Aliyah and a few of our panelists here have been looking at, within their banks, how can they look at what you'd consider, you know, private equity today or assets, and how could we digitalize them, tokenize them to enable the processes to be more efficient and aka, let's say, green. And we can define what green would mean as well if we consider green, ESG compliant. You know, there's 3 different parts of ESG: environmental, social, governance. I think we're going to be able to unwind a little bit of that later on in the panel too. But maybe we can just get a little bit of perspective there. Ali, if you'd like to start us off here in terms of, from that green banking perspective, the things that Signum are doing in a new way to allow for the things that were done in maybe the older traditional world of banking in a more efficient manner at Signum.
Sure, yeah. I mean, happy to talk about this because this is honestly the most exciting part of what we do at the bank, in my personal view. But when we think about financial assets today, right, and think about think of them through an ESG lens. So from an environmental perspective, you can talk about making things more efficient, requires, you know, less people working on it, requires less computation, requires less amount of effort being put into a specific topic, right? So that's maybe one thing we put aside. But from a social and from a governance perspective, I think the benefits that you can really outline from building assets on blockchain infrastructure, it's really special. So from a social perspective, we talk about how finance needs to be democratized, where a lot of people in the world still don't have access to maybe even simple financial rails, and much less to more complex, more sophisticated financial instruments. This is just something that people don't know about, they don't have access to, and maybe even if they have access to it, being able to transact with it in an efficient way where they're not spending a huge amount on, say, transaction fees, on KYC fees, all of these types of blockers that currently exist. And so at Signum, one of the things we worked on, and I can talk about a hard example here, right? So you may have heard of Hamilton Lane. It's a huge money market fund, asset manager out of the UK. They're huge, right? Like over 800 billion in assets. And obviously a very, successful firm. They do really well. And even someone like me, obviously I know I'm very privileged, but even someone like me typically wouldn't be able to buy in and participate in a fund like this because the cutoff for entry is $125,000. For anybody to buy into a fund like this, that's the first starting outlay, just because the administrative overhead on participation in this fund is so high. At Signum, because we've been able to tokenize this asset, put it on chain, remove a lot of the complexity around the management of this fund, suddenly the cutoff, the buy-in price for a fund like this is 1,000 Swiss francs. And that's something that's accessible to literally like most people. And that for me was one of those moments of like, wow, this is something we've been talking about for a really, really long time. And finally you see it in action where much less sophisticated players, maybe someone like myself, can actually participate in something that is usually reserved for, the Warren Buffetts of the world. It's not been accessible to someone like me before. And if that's not a step forward in, the social outreach of a product, I mean, that's a big step forward. And so that's one part of it. And on the governance side, I think working with any stock, any commodity, any kind of asset class today, there's very little you can do as a retail player. You can maybe go onto your Interactive Brokers account and buy one Apple share. Great, well done. You're now participating in Apple. But being able to actually be a part of that governance process is something that just isn't really feasible for most people that are engaging with the financial ecosystem, right? And with a blockchain tech stack, with a blockchain tech layer in place, suddenly these are things that you can make so much more efficient that people are able to also participate in the governance of companies. And again, I'll give you a real world example here. At Signum, we work with MakerDAO. I can talk about this because it's a public case. MakerDAO is one of the largest crypto companies in this, or not companies, it's a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization. But for simplicity, let's call it a company for right now. MakerDAO wanted to diversify some of their holdings and put 500 million into, let's say, traditional market funds, right? And they wanted to move this money out of the crypto world and put it into traditional market funds. They worked with a different bunch of players to enable this process. And they actually had to go out and get votes from their DAO governance holders to say, hey, should we do this? And literally 60,000 people participated in this vote. They had more than 60,000 votes to say, yes, let's go ahead and diversify the treasury holding of this DAO. And bringing that level of diversity to governance is, again, something that's only possible when you really are built on this blockchain tech stack. So those are two aspects I can talk about.
But Paul, you want to add, yeah?
Yeah, because it's actually a topic that I spent 3 years on because I was in banking and ESG services for 3 years just before joining Banque de Lubac. So I think one important thing, in France, for example, there was a lot of talks of the carbon impact of having multiple accounts in multiple banks. And actually, the calculation was wrong, right? Because it just, took the bank global carbon and then divided it by the number of customers, and you ended up with a huge number, and everyone was like, okay, for €1 single I have in a bank, I spend as much as like 1 hour by car, etc. So it was actually far more complicated than that. And for me, ESG and green banking is about two things, right? You have to actually do things to improve either their environmental, social, or governance. The other issue is the fact that you have to prove it. And in this market, proving it is also about getting the right data. And the ESG data in the financial industry is actually quite expensive right now. And that's just where I think blockchain would be a real plus. You need to get ESG data from the firms you are investing in. From the firms you have as clients, etc. And you have a huge initiative right in Europe called CSRD, where everyone will have to do extra financial report and bring data. The issue is, you are not going to collect this data yourselves, right? Because it's going to be buried under 34 pages of an extra financial report. But people are going to grab it for you, and then they are going to sell it back to you. Whether if we got a decentralized blockchain, public blockchain, where every firm would put this data accessible for everyone, not only would it be unmutable, right? Because you cannot change the things that you have declared. You can amend it, but everyone will have full history on it. But then everyone would get access to this data. And for once, because I've been in the financial industry for some years, and I think all of you too, we were supposed to be the good guys, right, for once in our career, because we could actually bring forward, a revolution around ESG. The issue is the data is too expensive, and it's like walled behind fees, right? Whereas if we would make this data public, every firm would have to comply to what they declared, first of all. And second of all, it would bolster innovation around how to use this data to create new financial products, etc. The issue is you cannot put that in a usual database that you all know about, because everyone can just change the data that they don't like, right? So this, I think, from a personal point of view, would be a real plus if everyone would make this data public. And the only way to do that in an immutable and decentralized way would be to use this kind of technology, right? The other part would be about, I think, optimizing the access to votes, etc. And even on the social part, as Alia mentioned, a lot of people, and even you, Chris, mentioned, a lot of people don't have access to internet or everything, but a lot of people have phones, right? And if you look at what Samsung did, etc., you now have a wallet in your telephone. So you can actually save money by using this technology with lower impact and lower access to products that will actually help you down the road. So that's, for me, green banking is all about, optimizing your internal processes, but you have the core banking system that we mentioned previously, but that's something. Optimizing your processes, but also transparency. And transparency will only be achievable if it's immutable, because if you can change what you did previously, you've seen all the scandals, it's not going to be a good way to prove to everyone that you actually did the thing you said to everyone you were going to do.
Yeah, I really like that point. I think you trust but verify. You need to be able to do it, but you need to also be able to show that you did it as well. Felix, just for you here, because to bounce off the topics of tokenization, but maybe other applications of blockchain technology within Incor, do you have anything that you'd like to share, kind of on that kind of the green banking side related to Incor, and kind of how you're tackling that subject for yourselves and for your clients?
Yes. I'd like to give 3 examples, but I didn't want to talk about tokenization.
Oh, fine.
But let me just mention in one sentence. We do tokenization for Swiss ordinary shares, credit-linked products, fixed income setups, and credit and fixed income, participation note, the Swiss version of the easy access stuff, and what else? Besides that, even NFTs and stuff like that we could do for a collectible, I don't know, painting of art or something like that. Now, that is what we developed because, well, the first movers need to develop stuff, fortunately enough. But currently, we don't have the good cases, not here in Switzerland, not from the actors that we are specialized on. We see many cases rather with our clients. Our clients are serving those other cases, and they are more in developing countries, and that's where the cases are smaller and much more relevant to the local society, etc. So that is in place, that is happening, but it's still early time. And on that side, besides that, we think of it, in our DNA where we're based, we think of it this way just to make it happen and to have the infrastructure. I need to compliment very strongly Signum and these banks who really developed this tokenization much more visible and much more. They did quite a lot to make it known to the public, to the regulator itself, to other banks, and so on. So I think that's something that we can be quite proud of. What we have already started to develop 4 years ago, plus minus, and until last year we reached amazing examples. Now,
Fantastic.
Let's see when we will make it work.
Yeah.
But maybe on the green banking specifically, examples. Banking is a service for real-world happenings. In the real world, you need to have usually you have a project or a company or a intra-national organization, as we have them. I don't know how many dozens here at home, whether it's the Red Cross or the United Nations or and plenty of those others. Now, banking these projects has never been too easy. We are a correspondent bank, so we are serving in dozens of fiat currencies across the whole globe. We have certainly some legal limitations and some jurisdictional limitations, but besides that, we are the traditional market is quite accessible into the world. And via local banks that help you go the last mile, you kind of can reach 3/4 of the globe. Now, that we know already since decades. Now, what does blockchain do? First of all, you've got new projects which are doing fundraisings, which are doing investment structuring. As an example, with making the structure of a share divisible and more accessible. This restructuring is what we do in our paying agent services. And there's plenty of things how you can use this to overcome some hurdles, while still we're talking about Swiss securities. They have the ISIN number. They're regulated exactly the same way as your Novartis share. No difference whatsoever. And the actors behind it are the Swiss exchanges and the Swiss banks and market makers and paying agents and so on. So this is not changing, but the outcome is changing immensely. And until we could have done this even in the traditional way, but why? It was working already for the large clientele and for the projects which were developed enough so that they can pay us, their lawyers, their auditors, and everybody. So why should we have changed it? And it took the blockchain industry and the actors therein doing the first tokenizations and or Uniswap, DAO online-based marketplaces to give access and then do this in a really not compliable way. But that is what was necessary so that the traditional finance woke up and actually went the next stage.
Yeah.
We just went one step further. And this is continuing on so many different fronts.
That makes sense. Thank you. Thanks, Felix, for sharing that. And maybe just to talk now into a next topic around kind of overcoming some of the greenwashing that we might have been hearing and driving trust, towards what Paul was saying, right? We need to be able to verify some of these things as well. I mean, Milka, would you be able to give some perspective around how kind of blockchain can support in that kind of trust but verify, improving trust in sustainable financial products, and your perspective around kind of your clients, or also some of the internal products that you're offering that can allow the world to be a better place and, let's say, a greener place to stay on topic through blockchain technology.
Let me give you two answers on that. The first one, the banker's answer. When we initiated the ESG conformity in our products, for our products, and the advice to our clients, if they want to have ESG compliant products or not, we put all our asset managers and our senior staff through a training. And basically the key finding for us, the key frustration for us was, there's a lot of data out there, there's a lot of very expensive data out there, because this data is checked and validated and lots of paper is moved around. But in the end, you're not sure if the, I don't know, 4 out of 5 points is a good rating or ranking or not, and whether this company that is behind this ranking and rating is actually doing something good and green. Reason for that is there is only so much possibility of checking and controls that can be done by humans. That is otherwise things would be incredibly expensive, and nobody would be able to afford this data. The vision that I see with blockchain technology is, imagine a Sondo or BASF, one of the leading chemicals company in the world. They have huge facilities in Ludwigshafen, close to where I come from, and they have hundreds of outlets of CO2, heat, methane, other chemicals, what they emit and are allowed to emit into the atmosphere. They do measure what they are emitting, but they are not forced to publish this publicly. They have to report this to the local government, to the federal government in Germany. If they would put all this data on blockchain and say, this by the hour, these are the emissions that we do, and compare it to last year, the year before, or the next year, then you could have really a good idea on what they're actually doing, emitting. At the moment, what they have to report is, okay, look, we produce X tons of this product, this by theory, by chemical calculation, this would lead to Y tons of CO2. Yeah. But they don't have to do the actual reports on that. But this is quite expensive to put also people on there to check this, see if this data is accurate, is there an error in the measurement, etc. And audited, some third party has to go through this. Okay, look over there is the reader for this emission. All this costs incredibly lot of money, but once you have installed this and this works on a technology basis, automated in an automated way, then this company could say, okay, look, we emit exactly this amount of CO2 in this location, in our factory in Nanjing, we emit that one, and in Sao Paulo we accept the Y, and in total we emit all this. And by that you can say, okay, this is good, bad, or whatever, but at least the buyer of a bond issued by BASF or the shares of BASF could say, okay, this is a green company, it's an orange one, it's a gray or a black one. At least we had transparency. So this is one of the challenges that we face as a banker, really, to stand behind this kind of project and say, in the end, we do not know if this data that we receive, in our case from MSCI, one of the leading data providers in financial services, is accurate or not. And they don't take guarantee on that. It's just, it's generally accepted that their data is good. Yeah. So this is one of the challenges that we have on the one side. Let me give you a totally different example of what blockchain technology can do in a way of banking that most of you would not consider as banking. If you want to have Bitcoin, you need to mine Bitcoins. That means someone has to calculate the transactions, validate them, and as a reward, to put it very, very simple, in doing this work, if you are lucky, you get a Bitcoin. So it's kind of a slot machine. Everybody's calculating. The fastest one gets a Bitcoin. Now, for these procedures, you need huge data centers. Data centers that have to be cheap, easy to manage, and especially they need a lot of energy. I think in recent years, there were huge discussions, oh, Bitcoin uses as much energy as Denmark, Norway, Sweden, whatever. And this is true to some extent, but if you take together all the financial service industry, I don't know what equivalent of energy we are using up at the moment. So back to the example, if you want to mine Bitcoin, you need cheap energy and servers, computers. In the past, they were sitting in Germany, France, Switzerland. Now, these places are too expensive. Where do they go? Where energy is cheap and land is almost free. So I'm at a couple of mining companies that do this in Paraguay, using the energy coming from the Iguazu power stations, or in Ethiopia, where they have the Ethiopian Renaissance Dam established, and they developed in such huge sizes that they don't know where to put their energy. There are not enough people equipped with energy consumption and landlines to use this. So they are happy that a data center is placed next to it, and they consume the energy, they pay for this energy, and they get rewarded in Bitcoin. And part of these rewards also go to the government of Ethiopia.
Yeah.
If you, maybe you don't know, but this poor country, Bhutan, has lots of energy, water energy, clean energy. And they are generating Bitcoin from this energy and keep it in their stock for bad times, so to say, to pay off their debt, to develop their country in a way that is totally out of the financial services industry, but it works in an alternative way of financing development.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think just the ability to say that you're able to run a quote-unquote financial system through a waste product is actually quite an interesting one. And I mean, we won't go into other points of, let's say, verification on-chain for blockchain, as we spoke a little bit about proof of work, but there are a lot of, let's say, newer blockchains that use proof of stake and other, let's say, much more energy efficient by design infrastructure. But it is true that when you look at Bitcoin and the likes, if I remember correctly, the statistic, it's 76% of Bitcoins that are mined come from energy efficient, or let's say sustainable sources, which would actually just go into the ground, because the ability to store electricity today is very, very difficult. So thank you so much for sharing that one, Milko. Maybe Chris, now coming to you, and happy if you do have any comments to share from what the bankers have said. But you're doing things thanks to blockchain technology that are creating a lot of positive impact that you might not have been able to do without it, and maybe in, let's say, the more traditional financial world, you might not have been able to do either. So would you like to talk a little bit about some of those things?
So I've got a product they can invest in if they want, since I've got them all captive on stage. I'd like to go back to the data question for a second. And data is so important. It's too expensive right now. It's necessary for anything that is green or ESG. I mean, you need this data from places that are really hard to get to. The places, like, you don't need that data from downtown Geneva. That's not where the ESG data is like lacking. It's lacking from a farm in Malawi. And how do you get it? So right now you get it because you pay somebody often to go there, which means you have a person. And I'm a very trustworthy person, but I just don't trust in general that easy. You know, it's like, it takes a while to get trust. Maybe I've been in Geneva too long. You're like, so you have some random thing somewhere in the world, somebody gives you a piece of data. Do you trust it? Like off the bat, maybe no. The data's from far away. It's about stuff that is analog often. So how do you measure the number of trees? Well, somebody has to go and count the trees. Then you're relying on that. Did they enter the data correctly? Did they put it into Excel right? And data can be just really, really bad. And I don't think we often see how bad it is until there's a huge financial crisis. Not that the bankers know anything about that, but so data's really, it's a real critical issue here. And one of the things that we're trying to do, we're building a marketplace for trading connectivity, for trading gigabytes, just like you can trade other commodities. That's the thing for you all to invest in, by the way. So we're building something called the Connectivity Credits Marketplace, and we can't do that without having data, all of this green data that we're talking about. So when we are connecting schools, if you want now, take out your phone, go to maps.giga.global. If you go to maps.giga.global, you can see a map of schools, and you can see many of them flashing. We're getting data from those schools about their connectivity every 4 hours. And that data comes through and it's written on chain, and the school is a data element that's public for you to examine. And that means you can do a lot of stuff with it. So this is really interesting, Shiraz, because for me, like when we started it, I wasn't thinking of selling our data. Because I was building something that I needed, and I needed that data to be real for the marketplace we're building, because if we don't have real data, you can't trade something, and the marketplace is important, and so on and so on. But as we've been showing it to people, people are like, wow, you're getting data from 150,000 schools all over the world in places that we desperately need data about, I don't know, soil pH, or whether there's rain, or whatever. Can we use your data? So we now have groups coming to us that I never would have thought asking to use our data, and we're not selling it yet, we're trading it. So we're saying, if you want to use ours, give us some of yours. And their data's often not great because it's analog. So we're now seeing this movement towards having things that are about real digital data and being able to take that and move it around and share it and sell it. And you can't do that if it lives in a centralized database. I think, Paul, exactly to your point. So for us, the green financing anything in this development space that you want real data on needs blockchain. I don't think you can do it otherwise. And I know that's a bold statement to make, but I would be very surprised. I would not put my money into something that I couldn't verify. And so that's sort of, being borne out in practice in our work as well.
Just as if I may, a quick little thing also, because it has been important for at least for the past decade, I would say, but when we talk about green banking, obviously ESG, but when we talk about ESG, it's more often than not about environment, and then everyone talks about carbon, etc. Just something that we've seen, and I think would be of great interest, is removing the bias when you talk to someone, hire someone, or want to take someone as a client. And for example, I've seen a really interesting project being put on, where the individual, you and me, you just put your data, your KYC data, right? But you put it on a blockchain which is encrypted, and then you can apply to things. You can apply to jobs, you can apply to loans, you can apply to credit lines, etc. And you don't apply, it's all about removing the bias and the middleman bias, right? You apply to something which has criteria, and those criteria are executed on chain by a program that isn't biased, and then you can go to the next step. And this kind of thing is all about the S in ESG, right? Where you learn about parity, you learn about bias, you learn about representativity. And we've seen that already successful in a lot of processes. And I think more often than not, when you talk about green banking, one will say, yeah, lower your carbon, etc. But it's also about the S, it's also about the governance, right? It is all about transparency. And you've seen a lot of scandals on representativity, parity, etc., which would be solved if we all had equal chances at applying at something where the criteria are clearly stated and verifiable, right? Yeah. And this kind of removing the bias through removing the middlemen would also, I think, bring trust back a little bit in the financial world.
Thank you. Thanks for all of those examples that for me resonate quite well with regards to how we can improve, let's say, or enable green banking, or what the future of banking could look like. Now I guess it's your time to challenge a little bit our panelists here if you didn't hear enough of that juicy content that you were looking for and expecting. So do you have any questions for our panelists here today? Yes. I think we have okay, 2 microphones.
Hello, thank you so much for the panel. It's really interesting. I'm doing my bachelor's thesis right now in the circular economy in Southeast Asia and trying to see if I can incorporate a blockchain focus on it. So my question would be specific to emerging markets. Do you think real-time data recorded on the blockchain can be used as assets of value to get bank loans? So this would be like for SMEs, or are there other ways that it can help these SMEs get access to finance?
Whoever wants to take that, I mean.
Yeah, yes.
Really, yes.
Yeah. So we're doing it. And this connectivity credits marketplace that I talked about is, I'm not sure how much I can say, it's all being recorded and live. Okay, so we are in one country in sub-Saharan Africa we've just launched a program to do exactly that. So if you imagine you're a small ISP or a small SMME, you're selling internet to your community, and you want to go to another community, how do you get the loan for that? Right? The capital expenses are too high to, it's really hard, you can't just put up a tower. You need some loan, loans cost too much because you're small. By issuing these connectivity credits, which you can trade on our marketplace, coming soon, investment opportunity here. By issuing these connectivity credits, we just issued our first connectivity credits to small companies in this country, in sub-Saharan Africa. They're now taking those and they're able to use those to get bank loans. They're also able to use those to verify that they connect schools in that community. So suddenly, because the school turns on and that credit gets validated, it gets verified. So suddenly this real-time data, as long as it's really live and you can see it, becomes super, super valuable for a lot of things. The really interesting thing is you can then trade that credit. So the SMME might go and connect 3 towns and get 3 credits. They know they can redeem them for some tax break from the Ministry of Finance, but they also have those 3 credits that they can trade to somebody else for something else they might need. And so what we're seeing is that because the data is real, because it's on-chain, and because there's a marketplace there, you can actually bring other people into this economy that otherwise wouldn't have been able to participate in any kind of transaction flow like that. And it's super, super exciting.
And just because I actually have, as a client, a project in Africa. And what's actually interesting is that they put the data, of financial data of small firms, right, in Africa, in order for them to get access to small-term loans, which are usually, really expensive for them. 2 ways in which the blockchain helped here. This lowered the cost of loans for them a lot, but then also a lot of other players went into the ecosystem and developed quite quickly a rating, right? And you would say, okay, I'm having 3 stars on Google on my loan, great. But it actually helped a lot all the small firms, because if you pay back your loan every single time, only your bank is going to know it, right? If you are banned, your bank will tell the other, oh, he's banned, okay? But that's just it, right? If you are a good payer, right? The other banks know about it, because not everything, but what's important is written on chain, so any other bank doesn't have to take their phone or get access or buy data, right? They can just say, okay, this is a good historical client for banks, and I want him as a client, so I can actually give him a loan. And then I will write if it's sufficient or not. It's not live data because the bank has to write it, but at least it's live enough, I would say, meaning that you can have a real-time situation, financial situation for your clients. And it also actually helps a lot on a risk and compliance department when you want to give loans, because you actually quite hedged a little bit against the evolving financial situation of your clients.
Thank you. I hope that answered your question. Do you want to?
Maybe just we have clientele, fintech companies. Those who use blockchain technology to gather, manage, and to organize and use data usage. These data usage companies, they are quite some of them. They are inventing new services. Those have not been done. They probably could have done it in another way, but the old companies didn't do it. So these blockchain companies, they are actually creating new industries, services, products out of it. And we see that, well, as a bank supporting them, so they're just the bank for the company, but it's amazing to see that, there is an outcome, and this is nothing promised. This is real, operational banking, which is running, and not since 3 months. So there's quite a number of companies which are quite active since quite some time. Well, at least within the last 4 or 5 years.
That's our visibility. Thanks, Felix. Fantastic. Please, question just here in the middle. Thank you.
Hi, thank you very much. Super interesting to understand a bit better about blockchain and the practical applications. One question I had, which was more from a technological perspective. So blockchain obviously is, the value proposition is it's transparent, it's encrypted, it's secured. You cannot really decrypt it because it would take too much calculus power, if we can call it that way. Recently, we've seen the new announced by Google on quantum computing. I know it's pretty far in the future, but we all think about the impact it could have on cryptography as a whole and blockchain in particular. So I was curious to see what was the expert opinion on this specific topic.
I mean, so what I've heard related to quantum, and happy to have the panelists also answer, is that we're still a good, 5 years away from it really being able to have certain impact. I think if you look at the actual value of the cryptocurrency market today, you're around, let's say, $4 trillion. It's negligible compared to all other systems that are encrypted into, let's say, even less secure ways. So my perspective is that if quantum computing really hits, it's going to impact all the other industries much harder than it will this one. And SHA-256, which is the encryption method used by Bitcoin, and others use different encryption methods. It's been very tough to break it so far. So yes, it could happen, but I think we're still quite some way away. There are a few protocols, so blockchains themselves, that are looking at adding essentially layers or upgradable layers to have quantum resistance. We had actually one recently that was here in Geneva speaking about what they do. But let's say in today's market, it's become let's say it's too complex or too expensive to add that module today when it's not yet a prominent threat, let's say. But these things can speed up quite quickly too. I don't know if the panelists have anything to add to any of that.
The quantum computing risk is a risk that everybody is always thinking about for the blockchain industry, for cryptocurrencies, for the wallets where it is stored, and for the functionality of smart contracts and the operational side of this. There it is a risk. Now, sorry to give you my banker's view on it. As Milko said, private banking is boring, and it's good that it's boring. Our job is to take your worry away. I'm 100% sure, and I have no idea about the technology of the other banks here, but I'm 100% sure that they store every single cryptocurrency similarly to us, and that is much more complex, just being regulatory-wise, how that needs to be done. Being global custodian, if you hold the assets of dozens or even more banks, you need to have quite a lot of, fortunately, coming from the regulatory side, a lot of protection. This is fortunately, it has been brought into the technology, so the technological protection we needed to put in place in order to be accepted by the FINMA as a global custodian for cryptocurrencies, because if we lose the currencies of our client bank, number 1, 2, 3, 17, 25, then the whole industry has a big problem. But what do I want to say? We don't make it boring. For us, it's quite a job actually, and we are continuing to improve it because the whole industry is improving. But all of our banks, I'm 100% sure that I can speak for the others as well, our job is to take away this worry. And this worry, which is maybe the quantum computing will bring into this niche industry, into the wallets. Our wallets are exactly therefore set up in the most inconvenient way you can imagine. And not only the wallets, but also the banking, the core banking systems behind it, how it is booked and recorded and everything, and reported to the government and everything, plus then the teams which are actually dealing with it. Because it has to do with the hardware tools, with these computer-like tools that you need to access it. It needs to be how it is backed up if the house burns down in a fire and those computer tools go bust, all of this, and with different teams, different signatures, it's the most inconvenient way possible. You would not want to store any Bitcoin on it, I promise you. We do it all because we do that not for one client, but for hundreds or thousands of clients, from the small retail client having 0.001 Bitcoin or ETH with us to the ones having multiple hundreds of Bitcoin even, and thousands of the other Bitcoins as well. That's the only reason why we do it. And that's what banks are quite good at. And I think even, in such an intranational setup that we are, I mean, I'm not saying that other big banks are not this way, but in Switzerland we have kind of a good reputation on this side. And we, specifically because of the negative stuff that is happening also in our industry, we all have a very strong interest in protecting this one thing where we know that we're the best in the whole world.
And just if I may, I think you should be more worried about the tax that the whole industry of the world is going to pay to cybersecurity to proof all their systems against this, which we will end up as customers paying, right? So everything is going to be up in price because everyone has to be protected against this new way of, against hacking, as Shara said. All the encryption that is used everywhere in every single industry will be able to be hacked by this one. We'll just increase the SHA-256 or something like that to something that is quantum resistant, but then we'll have to migrate all our system and we will end up paying it as customers, right?
Yeah, sounds like an expensive and scary future.
Yeah, and to be fair, I was a bit provocative because we're talking about blockchain, but if that really happens, we'll have bigger problems to worry about, I think.
Yeah. I'll hack Visa if I may, but okay.
Yeah. Fantastic. Do we have any other questions in the audience for us today? Yeah, please.
Hi. Former banker, Merrill Lynch, and entrepreneur with emerging markets now. Low-lying fruit, in my point of view, is world remittances. We are almost at $1 trillion per year. What's your view, blockchain and world remittances? Because they're getting ripped off. And if we figure out world remittances through blockchain in an equitable way, we would be changing a lot of people's lives all over the planet in a very quick, one kind of punch way. What are your views? Thank you.
It's already happening. It's happening. It's on the move. It's in the increasing number of stable coins flowing from one country to the other, and not just between Europe and the Americas and Singapore, but also into developing countries, from north to south and backwards. The thing that the challenges that most of the banks still have is to identify the counterparty that is receiving these stable coins. But apart from that, we all traditional banks have to be careful how much asset flow will move from traditional fiat payments in dollars, euros, and pounds, move into these digital assets by the year, or even rather by the month. If you see how much the usage increase in USDC, USDT in developing countries, in Brazil, in Nigeria, in South Africa, in all these countries that have high inflation, and Turkey is also a good example. The flows between the countries, but also the flows within these countries is a good example of what the future will bring, and we will have to see whether the central banks will step in and say stop it, because they are losing very fast very much of the grip on their paying systems.
And I mean, listen, this is not financial advice, but at all. I just talked to our team in Kyrgyzstan. We've helped to connect almost all the schools in Kyrgyzstan. One of the guys was saying, they were connecting some of the last schools. There's 60 left up in the mountains. And he said, I was out in a village up in a mountain where they didn't even have radio signal. It was too high until recently. Now they've got internet because we've kind of managed to get it out there. And he said, farmers there are getting remittances. And I said, well, I get it. He's like, no, in Bitcoin. And I was like, to me, that's amazing, because Bitcoin is not easy to use. And it is not something where there are off-ramps everywhere. So you've got farmers in rural Kyrgyzstan using it. Something's changed, and I think it's very interesting that may end up being the killer app of all of this. After all, like Satoshi might have had something, known something.
Just a little comment, because actually the stable coins that are going to be MiCA compliant, etc., they have to prove, that you can exchange $1 versus $1 that is actually held at a custodian or a bank, which is actually counterintuitive to what blockchain was built upon, you know, decentralization of finance. And we actually saw really great examples of stable coins where the ecosystem had an interest in maintaining one stable coin equal $1, right? Which I think would have been really interesting if, you know, we had those kind of currencies. Unfortunately, at the moment, it is still €1 equal 1 euro, USD euro, ERC, sorry, I'm a bit tired. But so the bank is still there, right? The custodian is still there, the real world is still there. But maybe at some point, I have already seen initiatives, you will have the BRICS, for example, or the emerging market that are going to bring themselves together and say, okay, I'll create a stable coin where I can send money to everyone in my ecosystem, but it's going to be pegged to a value for everyone. Maybe it will be Bitcoin, maybe it will be gold, maybe it will be dollar, unfortunately, but that's the way it is, where every single player in the ecosystem has an interest of maintaining the value of one coin equal $1, right? And it can be via mining, which was already done, but it can also be via maintaining the exchange ecosystem, validating transactions, etc. And I think this is going to be the real revolution. Whereas just, you know, having a coin that is just a digital dollar where you can exchange it for a real dollar is the first step, necessary first one, but the real way of moving all those funds around instantaneously in an interesting way is going to be achieved when we achieve this real complex problem, I'd say.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, I think they do say that time flies when you're having quantum fun, because we are a little bit out of time. So thank you so much for tuning in and being here until the end with us. Let's give a round of applause to our panelists. Thank you so much.